Lizzie. I don't ever smoke the dizzy, but we can always share some ditsies. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to rhyme. Life's all of us, not every moment. We can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, welcome guys, Miss Liz in the house, and I have the incredible Dr. Rob Scheer. I hope I'm saying it right. If not, I'm going to get him to pronounce it. But we're going to talk about a topic that is really dear and passionate to my heart. You guys know Miss Liz was in the foster care system, so I got a little touch of that garbage bag. So we're going to talk about that bag, and we're going to talk about comfort cases, and we're going to change it, and we're going to get you guys involved today in the conversation, how you feel about it if you were a foster kid. We want to hear your stories as well. So before we get started, you know how Miss Liz rolls. Get over to all those platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all of those good platforms, and give those a like, follow, subscribe, and get these tea times out there. Also, jump over to the podcast apps, Podbean, Listen Notes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, all of those good platforms. And also check out babyboomers.org, because Miss Liz is partnered with them. And you can also find some incredible podcasts over there as well if you're looking to be on different podcasts. But before we get started, let's do the disclaimer and then a beautiful intro. And then we're going to get Rob in here, and we're going to spill a good, strong tea today. Today's tea is driven by purpose, resilience, and compassion. That is the tea we are serving in this house. We do not serve a beverage. We serve storytelling and words. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicating to sharing real-life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. I'm Miss Liz is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All guests, viewers, and participants are responsible for using their own good judgment when considering any action or decision that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners' and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of the discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly on my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or visit my link tree at Miss Liz's Tea Times. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. I, Miss Liz, welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect your wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you are ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Well, welcome to Tea Time with Miss Liz, where stories become bridges to awareness, healing, and humanity. Today's guest is someone who turned personal pain into a mission that is now changing the world of children around the world. Please join me in welcoming Rob Scheer, founder of Comfort Cases, advocate, author, and voice for children in foster care. Rob's story begins with his own lived experience growing up in foster care system, a journey marked by instability, hardship, and moments no child should have to endure. One of the things that stayed with him most was watching children move from home to home carrying their belongings in a garbage bags. That reality became the spark for change. Today, through Comfort Cases, Rob and his team provide foster youths with backpacks filled with essential items, comfort items, books, pajamas, hygiene products, and dignity, reminding children entering care that they matter and are not forgotten. But Rob's mission goes beyond supplies. It's about restoring humanity, restoring dignity, and creating awareness around reality many children silently face. His journey is proof that our deepest wounds can become the reason we create change for others. So grab your cup and lean in. Today's tea time is about resilience, advocacy, healing childhood trauma, and the power of compassion to transform lives. Let me get Robin here and let me get him to say his last name so we can get it out there right.
Hello, Miss Liz. And by the way, my last name is Scheer. It's Scheer with an S.
See, I really got to go see a tutor for that pronouncing letters and sounds. Like these names, some of these names I come up with, people are like, what is she saying?
Okay, so I have to tell you something, Miss Liz. I make it very clear to my guests on my podcast, Fostering Change, is I don't make me say your full name because I'm going to hack it up. So let's just be on first name basis. So guess what? You can call me Rob.
That sounds good. I'll call you Rob, and we'll keep from butchering the last name up. So Rob, let's get to know you a little bit before we get into comfort cases. Who was Rob as a little guy, and who's Rob now?
Wow. The little Rob, the 12-year-old little boy who felt less than, that he was invisible, disposable, when that black trash bag, and by the way, I don't allow one to go far away from me because I don't want to forget where I came from, and I do not want my kids to ever be embarrassed of where they came from. So that 12-year-old little boy where that bag tried to define who he was, knew that there was going to be that older him that was going to make sure that the system realized that they didn't break him. You know, I'm a true believer that I don't blame the system because I personally, Miss Liz, I'm here to change the system.
And that's what we need is change, right, Rob?
Yeah, you know, if we pick that low-hanging fruit, our tree will grow taller. And, you know, our elders used to say this all the time, invest in a child, you invest in their future. That is a lie. And we need to stop lying to our youth. When you invest in a child, you actually invest in my future. You invest in your future, your viewers' future, because kids, they're our leaders of tomorrow.
Absolutely.
We need to invest in them.
You know, and tomorrow means today, yes, in my world, because tomorrow we don't know what tomorrow will bring, right, Rob?
Yeah.
So let's start making the change today, and let's start having that open conversation today.
Always. And you know, the thing that I always remind people, first of all, you know, Miss Liz, my story is not like many. You know, I'm the youngest of 10 kids. You know, my mother had been married 6 times. We lived in and out of every shelter in Maryland, Virginia, DC. Foster care had been in our vocabulary even at a young age. You know, my brothers and sisters had already started falling to the wayside. You know, you put the F word in front of kids, and this is what happens: teenage pregnancy, drug addiction, incarceration. We have one child every 2 minutes, 740 a day that enter a system that was created to take care of children. Now, let's talk about this system for a minute. This system was created many moons ago. As you know, I came in the system in the 70s. It was still there. It was there in the 60s. But the system was built to take care of those who could not take care of their own.
Yep.
What I do not think that we ever expected, and what we see today, and by the way, your viewers and your listeners, they can email and write and talk because they know this is the case. The industry has completely turned. The industry now, it's an industry that makes money on the backs of children. Listen to when I say that. It makes money on the backs of children. So when a kid enters foster care, we've already failed in society. We've already failed when a kid enters the system. So we need to do something for prevention. And then what we've done through all these years, we started throwing money into it. But the problem is, Miss Liz, the money wasn't going to the right people. It's not going to the right people. So what happened is we got this system that has become larger and larger and larger. Now it's billions of dollars, billions, mind you, with a B. I pronounced it correctly, billions of dollars. And by the way, nobody wants to talk about how bad it is because guess what? when you start talking about how bad it is, then you have to start correcting it. And when you start to have to correct it, you have to realize the waste. And you have to realize that all of that money that has been pumped in has done nothing for children in our foster care system.
My biggest thing is they give them no life lessons. They throw them into homes and they move them around, and then the kids at the age of 18 or 21, depending you're living, throw them to the streets. You figure it out.
Yeah. And I knew that firsthand. So, I entered the system in the 70s as a 12-year-old little boy, handed a bag, went into a foster home, lived there. And by the way, I wasn't that kid. I wasn't like my brothers and sisters. I was that kid. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. I used to clean their kitchen before they asked because I just wanted them to love me. And by the way, I used to watch their 3 biological kids because they used to say all the time, these are our biological kids and that's our foster kid. I lived that life. And then the fall of 1984, I turned 18 years old. I was a senior in high school. And by the way, I don't remember my brothers and sisters ever making it that far. And I know that my mother did not even have more than an 8th grade level. And I was a senior. And I remember I didn't think about foster care. I was just a kid, And I walked into my home. And there it was, my trash bag. I had not thought about it. I had not, none of that. And I remember I said to I thought were my parents, by the way, even though they were foster parent, that was my mom and dad. I called her mom, called him dad. And when they told me that I had to leave because I was 18 years old and they weren't going to get a check anymore, that crushed me as a young person. That what happened to the people that were there to support me, that were there supposed to love me, to guide me through this last, what I thought, chapter. But instead, again, it was all about money.
And it's sad because when they don't get the money, then it's no longer the love, right? So what we have love that's not conditioned unless there's a dollar sign.
Exactly. And that's why, that unconditional love, it's a word in our vocabulary that is not used enough. And I knew that firsthand. I didn't know what it was like to be loved unconditionally. And by the way, Miss Liz, I didn't know what it felt like to be loved unconditionally until I was in my late 30s and I met my husband. And he was the one who showed me truly what unconditional love was. And that is what opened up that doorway for us to start adopting our kids out of foster care. But yeah, when I turned 18, that trash bag was handed to me and I became homeless. 22,000 kids are scheduled to age out of foster care in 2026. 70% of those kids become homeless within 24 hours, just like me. And your listeners and viewers are saying, wonder why you didn't tell somebody. Let me explain why we don't tell people.
Yeah.
It's like we don't tell people because they stick us in reform schools, psychiatric hospitals, detention centers. They actually think we're the problem within the communities with the growth of the gangs and stuff. The communities have to remember they created us. They created us.
Exactly. That's the statement right there. They created the mess. It wasn't us creating the mess. It was them creating the mess, and they don't want to clean the mess. And I'm glad that you came to my table, Rob, because we need this conversation going. We need these people to understand the truth. Stop with the distractions. Stop with the little fancy dancy little trips and fancy homes and stuff like that. Actually start investigating, start asking the questions, start getting out there and being involved in your community as well. I was at an event and they were yelling, do you want to be a foster parent? And I was like, is that what we're doing now? We're just yelling out and screaming out for foster parents? I
try to attend as many things as I can because I want to know what's going on with our kids. And let me let everybody understand something. Nelson Mandela said it so clearly. Each and every one of us are judged in society by the way we treat our children. Let's also understand that kids in foster care, they don't belong to you. They don't belong to me. They don't belong to your viewers. They belong to us. To us. And so for me, as I go and I hear how they're recruiting foster parents, I'm in one county and they've got it on bus stops. So that made me think a minute. And so I remember I went back to my hometown and I walked into my church, a church, that we visit every Sunday with our kids. And I remember going to Reverend Esther and I said, "Excuse me, Reverend Esther, but can you ask me, when has anybody from foster care recruitment reached out to you to come and talk to our congregation?" She said, "Rob, I've been the pastor here for 15 years and never." I said, "You do know why that?" She said, "Why?" I said, "Because we live on the side of the tracks that they think that we're not interested in." Let me explain what that means. See, in foster care, whether we're in the state of Maryland, where I live, or in another state, in our country, the foster parents are given a stipend, okay? They're given a monthly fee every single month. For me, I am like, why can't we take a bit of that money and put it in an interest-bearing savings account for when those kids do age out, Miss Liz?
Yep.
I was that kid. I ended up going in the Navy. I became a very successful businessman because I never looked back. I was so worried that if people realized that I didn't know the difference between there, and there, because I was so uneducated because of the system, they wouldn't break bread with me. And to me, I didn't want that to happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Rob, we've got some questions that are coming into the studio, and you just mentioned the Navy, so we're going to get that one out first, and then I'll jump into the other questions. From Thrive Show, how did your experience in the U.S. Navy help shape the discipline and leadership needed to run a national nonprofit?
Wow, that's an amazing question. And by the way, I would love to give the Navy every bit of credit I possibly could. I was 18 years old, and most kids in foster care, first of all, we've only given 3 choices. That's it in foster care. Choice number 1, we give up. Suicide rate in foster care is higher than we've ever seen. Choice number 2, we give in. We commit the petty crimes. We fill the detention centers. Or we give it all we got. And that's what I did. The Navy, I joined. I was actually voted honor man. I graduated boot camp with honors. And then I went to my A school. And I was so excited. And then I woke up in the hospital. And I remember the nurse came in and said, "Seaman recruit, do you know why you're here?" I said, "No, ma'am." She said, "You had to have emergency surgery. Your bladder ruptured." And wow, my bladder ruptured. So when I was a little boy, as punishment, my father would punch me in my bladder every time I would pee without asking. From the time I was born till I was 12, that happened. And what happens psychologically, I held my urine and it just became habit. Not that I wanted to, not that somebody was going to hit me again, but because of that mental abuse that I experienced as a young boy, stuck with me at 18. And so when that bladder ruptured, the Navy went in and they fixed me. They put me in a hotel for 2 weeks for convalescent leave because I didn't have anywhere to go. And then I went back to the base. And I was so excited to finish my A school. But instead, the United States Navy handed me a yellow envelope. And in that envelope was my discharge papers. No medical for the rest of my life. No paycheck for the rest of my life. I was given 1 month of pay and a one-way plane ticket to Dulles Airport in Virginia. I flew back to that airport. I remember I actually hitchhiked down Route 7 to a little town called Gore, Virginia. In Gore, Virginia, there was a hotel that was paid by the week. And I knew I had enough money to last for maybe 2 months at this hotel, paid by the week. I hitchhiked into Winchester, Virginia, and I got a job at the Dart. Back in the day, the Dart was like Target. I remember working there, and I had enough money that I was getting about another week left before I was getting ready to be homeless again. And I walked into the Salvation Army, and I took the last bit of money that I had, and I bought a suit. I then went into the public library. And by the way, when I was homeless, that's where I lived most of the time. I was always in the library. And I remember I took a piece of paper and a phone book. And by the way, some of your listeners don't even know what a phone book is. I took that phone book and I started calling places. And every time, Miss Liz, I would hear that beep, 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 this number's been disconnected. I'd write the name down. And then I typed a resume. And then I put on that suit and I started walking door to door. And I walked into an office, and lo and behold, they hired me right on the spot. to work in their office. I was so scared. I thought I was going to go to jail because my resume was a lie. Anyway, I ended up working up the corporate ladder. I ended up getting my own apartment, buying my first car. But that guilt of lying, I went into that office, I'll never forget. And I handed the Lou, he was my manager, and I said, I got to resign. He said, what? He said, when I tell you to come to work at 8, you're here at 7. And when I tell you to leave at 6, you stay till 8. You're always writing everything down. What do you mean? You know, and I said, you remember that resume I handed you when you hired me 2 years ago? And he got up, walked over to the file cabinet, pulled out the folder, opened it up on his desk. He said, yeah. I said, that's all a lie. He said, what? I said, it's all a lie. And I proceeded to tell him. I remember, you know, and he looked at me and he said, you know what? You're the most honest person I've met. He's like, do me a favor, get back to work. And he picked up my resume and he ripped it up. So for your viewer, did the Navy help me? Hell yes, the Navy helped me, because I don't think I would have had the grit to do what I did and get to where I'm at today. So anchors away.
Navy gave you grit.
Yes. Well, I think I brought that grit to the table, Miss Liz.
Well, Rob, we have a question here for you, and it is from Kelly Grant. What gave you the initial courage to revisit your own childhood trauma to start comfort cases?
These amazing 5 humans behind me on the wall are kids. See, the thing is that my entire life, people have said, oh, they want to be doctors, lawyers, teachers, NFL players. I just wanted to be a dad. That was it. I wanted a kid to look at me and know that no matter what, they were taken care of, that they were safe. And by the way, that they were loved unconditionally. So 17 and a half years ago, when Reece and I decided to build our family, I actually wanted to adopt overseas. And my husband said, so why are we not adopting out of foster care? I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, I know about those kids. He was like, you were one of those kids. And he was right. I was one of those kids. And I was so worried about what people would think about me that I was worried to tell people. So we took all the paperwork, classes, all that stuff you have to do. And by the way, it's a lot. But don't be discouraged. It's worth it. And then afterwards, the phone rang. And my daughter was 4 and my son, Makai, were 2. And both of them came to our front door carrying a trash bag. And by the way, that hit me so hard, Miss Liz. That trauma, that all that had been bottled down, pushed back, all came out when I saw that black bag. And I remember I looked at the social worker and I said, are you kidding me? I said, you're telling me that after all of these years, that we still give kids trash bags? And the social worker literally said to me, well, what else should we be using? And I said, what about some dignity? But that was it. And then 3 months later, phone rings, 2 more kids. And so we had a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old arrive. So within 3 months, we had 4 kids, all 4 in diapers, all 4 with trash bags. So to your listener and your viewer, that is what had me go back. And by the way, I didn't go back immediately, because the kids arrived with trash bags. They were through foster care. I immediately was to my husband, we're adopting all 4. And we did. We adopted all 4 of the kids. And the first thing I did was get them passports, designer clothes, put them in private schools. I thought that was the stuff. Until 14 years ago, I was sitting in my office right outside of DC. And I'm a banker by trade. I've been a banker for 28 years. I had companies all over this country. And my husband had given up his career to be a stay-at-home dad to raise our kids. And we were going to do a toy drive. And I was like, we've failed our kids. He's like, what are you talking about? Our kids are amazing. I was like, no, Reece, we forgot to teach our kids 2 of the most important things. And Miss Liz, we are to teach 2 things. 1, our legacy. See, our legacy is about what we give and not what we take. But what we must understand as humans is that empathy, it is not in our DNA. Empathy is taught. And I had failed to teach my kids that because I was too worried to teach my kids how good it was to wear Louis Vuitton. And so for me, I needed to change that. And Reece said, what do you want to do? Miss Liz, I opened up my desk drawer and I pulled out a trash bag. Because again, I don't let it go far away from me. I don't want to forget where I came from. And I said, Reece, I'm going to eliminate these in foster care in DC. He said, you're BS crazy. I said, I know, that's why you married me. And so we gathered members of our church, local politicians, my senior staff, and I shared the story that I hadn't shared, about the 12-year-old little boy who had walked up to his first home, and about how that boy turned 18, and about how my kids had arrived, not even with a baby's blanket or a stuffy or even a toothbrush. And that, I knew I needed to grab that backpack, put a brand new pair of pajamas with a tag. I wanted every kid to get their own lotion, their own shampoo, their own conditioner, and their own bar of soap. Remember, kids enter the system because of a choice that someone else made. They walk into a house of strangers. We need to give them a brand new bar of soap. Then I want every kid to get a toothbrush and toothpaste. And by the way, my beautiful teeth, and you know my teeth are beautiful, they cost me an arm and a leg because nobody bothered to give me a toothbrush when I was a little boy. And so then I want every kid to get a book, an activity, a stuffed animal. And Miss Liz, my son Grayson, he was 5 years old when we packed our very first case. He's now 19. He said, Daddy, we have to put a blankie in every case. And I was like, a blankie? I was like, Grayson, you know these kids are not cold. He said, I know, Daddy. But every time they wrap themselves up in their blankie, they know we love them. My friend, that's what we all want. We want to be loved. We want to know we matter.
Rob, I want to ask you a question because you said you adopted your foster kids.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people don't know this. Once you adopt, the funding stops.
No, that's not true.
So why are foster parents not adopting children?
Because what you just said. Because what you just said, all the myths that people contend to put out there in society, these are bad kids. By the way, there's no such thing as a bad kid, Miss Liz. It's only a kid that needs to be redirected. You know, kids in foster care in the United States, if you adopt a child in foster care in the United States, you get that stipend every single month until that kid is 21 years old. You know, I would hope that you do the right thing, which is to take that stipend and put it in an interest-bearing savings account, because take it from a dad with 5 kids, 4 in college. College is expensive. So no, that's a myth.
Thanks for putting that out there, because I want people to hear the truth, and you know the truth, and you live the truth. So I want that truth out there, because a lot of people are focused on myths and not understanding the real truth. And that's what we're doing today with this live tea time, is we're going to do to the table. So thanks for bringing that.
And you know, Miss Liz,
because
if you look
I wanted to ask you that question because I had put my kids. Oh, is there a delay going on?
There must be a delay.
Are we back to normal, or are we still delaying?
I don't know. It was a delay there for a minute. Are you back?
I am back. You're back too. So that's good. I wanted to ask you that question, Rob, because I put my kids into foster care because of domestic violence and for safety purposes. And the reason that the foster parents gave me for not adopting was because they wanted the money. They were scared to lose the money. Yeah. So they didn't adopt, and they wanted to make sure that the connection, and then the connection between me and my children would still be there. Yes.
Okay, so I mean, Canada could be different than the United States. So in our country, there are things called open adoptions and closed adoptions. Okay, every single day, kids are being adopted with open adoptions. That means they know their family of origin. They have a connection with them. Some have even visitation. And by the way, I come from a closed adoption place, but we made the decision to make sure that every birth member knew a phone number that we have always kept, never changed it, because what we've always said to all the birth family is that you're welcome to come to our table. Our table's big enough for everybody. Anybody that's going to love and support our children, we want you there. But I also inform them, we are the parents, and you will never disrespect us. And I have to say, our kids have been with us, since for 17 and a half years. Our kids are now 17, 19, 19, 21. And by the way, we got to talk about my older son, who we didn't even meet until he was 18. We're involved with birth families, because what I always remind our kids, each and every one of us have a choice. We have a choice. Stop saying you're a product of your environment. You're not a product of your environment. That's a bunch of bull crap. You're a product of your choices.
Yeah.
Your choices. And so what I remind my kids is that their dads, we had a choice. We had a choice. And our choice was to make sure that our kids knew that they had a life story before us, and that we support that, and that I want them to know that. But that doesn't change their love for me or my husband, or the fact of the love we have for them, because they happen to talk to their birth parents. You got to feel better about yourself if you feel that pressure, because again, it is human nature. I'm not going to say it's not, because I felt it in the very beginning with my daughter when she got a hold of her bio dad. But also, I think it made my daughter and I stronger in our relationship.
Right, because there is a story before they come into the home. Rob, do you have your book on hand? Because I forgot to bring it out here. Let's talk about the book that you wrote, because I want to get that out there as well. I know it was sent to me, but I forgot where to find it. So there we go. Let's talk about this book for a little bit.
My book, A Forever Family. It's still available, by the way. If you go to comfortcases.org, you can actually order the book, and I'll personally sign it for you. It's still in circulation. It was published by Simon & Schuster and Derek Jeter. So crazy. In 2017, mind you, I was sitting in my office, and I packed some cases, a couple of years prior. I think, that Cover Cases had started in 2013, just a little thing. My assistant filled out the nonprofit stuff, because she was like, you got to have a nonprofit. And I was like, yeah, right. I come from the .com world. I'm a taker. And so it was Noelle who actually did that. And so what happened was we packed some cases, donated them, and there was it was a social justice platform called Upworthy. I'd never heard of it, but they had reached out to me, and they had asked my assistant if I would do an interview, because they had heard about this charity called Comfort Cases that we had started. And so, again, as somebody that's, an executive, I travel all the time. So it was like 2 months before I could get a meeting scheduled with this person who wanted to come, by the way, from New York to my farm in Darnestown and do the interview. I had forgotten about the interview, and she arrives, and I was like, oh, crap. So anyway, she comes into my sunroom, sits down, pulls out her camera, and proceeds to interview me. Little would I know, that was in December. She left. Never thought another thing about it, Miss Liz. February the 8th, Upworthy drops the video. I'm in LA, in my LA office. I call my husband, and I said, oh, I just got notification that Upworthy is going to air that interview they did with me. And my husband was like, are we going to be able to watch it before they interview it? I said, no, they said that they just directly go right to Facebook. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't think anything of it. My husband called me back a couple hours later. And he had the kids in the car. And I was like, oh, guess what? I was like, Dad had a video drop. I said, I'm going to go viral. And my son Tristan goes, Dad, you're not Snoop Dogg or anybody. You ain't going viral. I was like, he said, they just dropped the video. You're not going viral. I said, okay. February 10th, Friday. I'm flying home from LA. All day travel. Anybody who's ever flown from LA to the East Coast, it's a 6-hour drop flight. I touched down at DCA, going to a Chinese restaurant again. Love Chinese food with my husband, because it's my husband's birthday. Okay. And I get in the car, and my agent calls me and says, are you not listening to your phone? I was like, what are you talking about? I've been on a plane all day. I go on to Facebook. At that time, we had 20 million views.
Wow.
Well, Miss Liz, I will tell you, as of today, we have over 150 million views on that particular video, the most watched, shared, and liked video in history. But anywho, what got to it is this book, because Derek Jeter happened to hear me. and Simon and Schuster and CAA, and they said, this guy needs to write a book. And I reminded them that I don't know the difference between there. So Derek was kind enough to get me a ghostwriter, and we wrote a Forever Family. You know, it's been amazing, fostering change one child at a time.
You know, we need more stories like yours on Teatime, Rob. You know, real raw, authentic stories. That's what we need. So the people that are listening to today can actually get the truth out there and get an eyesight of what real is. You know, real tea. Like one of my guests, the listeners that just said, right? This is the kind of tea the world needs right now. This is a tea we need. We need real truth. We don't need the gossip or the fashion or all of that good stuff. We need real truth so we can change lives.
Well, we also need to stop the distraction, okay? That is such a huge thing, that we need to stop the distraction. First of all, I have said this quite often. Every single one of us fall. Every one of us fall. It's all on how we get back up. It's how we get back up. And I think that once again, as society, our forefathers built communities for only one reason, and it wasn't for our bushes to match. And I have said this so many times, when a kid enters foster care, we in our country have failed, because what has happened, we have forgotten what it truly is defined by love thy neighbor. Okay, good example. You see the kids out in the yard playing at some ungodful hour, okay? Instead of doing what you should do, which is walk next door, knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, you want to talk? Hey, you know, I see the kids are, you know, it's like 11 o'clock. Your kids, you know, is there? And she says, I got a new job and, you know, I can't afford to pay the daycare. So I had to leave my 5-year-old and my 12, and I didn't realize they were out of it. Whoa, wait a minute. You have to be gone those 2 hours? Yeah, I have a sitter for all but those, well, let me watch them. Let me get them ready for bed. Read them that bed night story till you get again. Instead, let me tell you what they do. They call CPS.
Yep.
And instead of CPS coming and finding out truly what the issue is, CPS does exactly what we told them to do. What did we tell them to do? Protect kids. What did we do? Somebody called and said a kid is in danger. So we snatched them up. But guess what? We just put that kid at even more danger. Instead of stopping, breathing, observing the situation, how can we handle it best for the kid? Instead, we just snatch the kid thinking, oh, that's best for the kid. Hell no, it's not best for the kid. Kid wants its mommy. Let's pay her a living wage so she can afford daycare. That is what we should be doing in society, Miss Liz.
Absolutely. Well, we have some more questions here for you, Rob, so I want to get those out to you. I'm going to get the one out that came in quite a while ago, and that one comes in from Richard. How can we get involved with comfort cases in our local communities?
I love it. By the way, I will remind everybody, you have to take care of your backyard before you take care of your front yard. So at Comfort Cases, we're true believers in that. We are actually in all 50 states, DC and Puerto Rico. And I know I do not need to remind your smart viewers, Puerto Rico belongs to us. Yes, it's surrounded by water, but so is Hawaii. You know, we all have an opportunity to be a part of this change that has taken place in our country in foster care. And I tell people all the time, it's 3 easy ways to pick that low-hanging fruit. Number 1, most of us stay in hotels. We take the lotion, shampoo, conditioners, and bars of soap. Those are perfect for us. You know, go to comfortcases.org. You can print out a give back box. It's only $20. You can ship me a 70-pound box. If you ship me those items with a note saying, hey, this is Chuck from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm donating all this stuff. Guess what I'm going to do, Chuck? I'm going to actually take those donations. I'm going to pack the backpacks, and we're going to send them back to St. Louis, and we're going to let St. Louis know that a nice man named Chuck donated those stuff. So those are things that you can do. You can always have an opportunity to make tomorrow better than it is today.
Absolutely. And I like that. Take care of your own backyard before you take care of the other backyard.
Yes.
The next question we have here is, what was the most challenging part of starting this nonprofit journey?
What was the most challenging thing for starting the nonprofit journey? The same thing that every single founder deals with: funding. I mean, simple as that. I mean, and this is the other thing that people don't want to talk about. They want to talk about money. Let's be real. Money is what makes the world go round and round. We got to have money to keep moving what we're doing. So I'm thankful for those people that give money. But I want to remind people, we are a 96% volunteer ran organization. It is unheard of for what we do. We are 96%, again, volunteer ran. We don't have any large corporate sponsors stroking me checks every month. We have the largest company in the world that supports us. And by the way, so your listeners and viewers know, 80% of nonprofits in the United States, 80% are under 250,000. Yeah. 80% of nonprofits in the United States are under 250,000. We are a 96% volunteer ran organization that has no large corporate sponsors giving checks monthly. But guess what? We're a $5 million organization that has been made on the backs of an $8 donation. Yeah, think about that. The average donor is $8. If that doesn't tell you that's a lot of humans helping, that's a lot of humans. So it's all about funding.
Absolutely. And everything runs around money, right? Rob, the next question I have for you is from Paula, and it's, how do you maintain your emotional strength while doing this heavy work?
Wow. I give myself grace, and I think that's something we all could come to the table with, is that we all must give ourselves grace. But what we all must understand is you can never, ever fill somebody else's cup if your cup isn't full. So you have to make sure that you fill your cup before you can fill somebody else's. So for me, I go to the gym, I go run with my kid, or something that I do with my husband, just fill my cup. So that's how.
And we have a question here from Michael. With over 320,000 cases distributed, how do you ensure the quality and dignity of every single bag?
I have to say we're so lucky with that, because we have an amazing group of volunteers who truly believe in our mission. And we truly do believe that every single child deserves to be seen, but every single child deserves to truly be loved unconditionally. So our bags are checked, they're inspected. We have a list of only what we put in our items. An example is, we do not allow any pajamas that have holiday themes. We do not allow spaghetti straps. We don't allow nightgowns, because we never want to put a young person in a situation that's uncomfortable. Okay? So we're very conscious about that. Guess what? We don't allow books that have mom or dad in the title, because I don't want that kid to be triggered. We don't know what's going to trigger that young person, and I don't want that. So we immediately, 14 years ago, said these are some of the things we will not do. And that is one of them, is we don't allow religious-based things within our organization. And again, I have my faith, okay? But that's my faith. That's my faith, not yours, and not these kids. And it's not my job to tell them what their faith should be. But what I should tell them is that if they have an open mind, anything is possible.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, I want to get into, because people can also go onto Amazon because you have a wish list.
Yeah, we have an amazing wish list. I say all the time, our wish list is great. And every single day we have kids entering foster care, which means every single day we need to send cases out. So any of those items, maybe they want to do a fundraiser, maybe they want to get their Chipotle or something to do a restaurant night, anything that they can do is huge. And by the way, I've said this before, take one penny, you add another penny, guess what? You got 2 pennies. It adds up. It adds up. And by the way, in the United States, we don't have pennies anymore. So I got to change that saying to a nickel.
We don't have pennies anymore in Canada either. They took them out. And I got a lot of pennies because I was a penny keeper.
So do I. And I'm scared to get rid of them because I think maybe I might be rich one day.
My dad had like a 5-gallon can of pennies when we were a little kid. And he's like, anybody that can pick that up will get a bag of candies.
I love that. I love that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the scholarships that you
yes.
do.
So, people ask me all the time, what are the 2 things that I would do to change the foster care system just like that? Number one, I talked about this earlier. I would set the kids up for financial success. I think that's very, very important. But I also would also open up the education pathways. And by the way, I do not mean just pay tuition. Kids in foster care need complete wraparound services. And we don't think about that. We only want to continue. Once again, foster care, stick a Band-Aid on it, stick a Band-Aid. No, we need to have surgery. We need to, and what we need to do, open up the education pathways. So at Comfort Cases, we actually give scholarships out every year. We just closed our application process, and we are so excited because we got the most applications we've ever received. And by the way, I just visited a college yesterday with one of my sons, and actually am convincing the college to give a scholarship, because I'm like, anybody that wants to give a scholarship. And by the way, you don't have to have a lot of money to give a scholarship.
Yep.
I have people that give $200 and it goes to the scholarship fund, everything. I mean, we got to get these kids, we got to embrace them. And so, yeah, comfortcases.org. You can find out all about our scholarships, our packing parties, all of the amazing things that are happening. And again, I've said this so often, the axle that the world spins around, that's not true. The axle the world spins around from the doers who push it every single day. Wake up and be a doer.
Absolutely. Stop talking and get walking.
I lost you again.
We have a question that just came in here for you, Rob, is what challenges still exist within the foster care system today?
I will have to say to you that every challenge that has existed in foster care today existed in the 70s. Yeah. How sad is that? How sad is that? We still have kids entering the system when they shouldn't have entered the system. We still have kids who stay in the system longer than they ever should stay in the system. We still have parents of origin who have given up because we have made it so freaking hard for them. And by the way, how dare any of us judge how to parent? There's no manual. There's no manual. We need to, again, be supportive. So I hate to say this. I see states are moving the needle, and I'm happy for that. I see, states, I've been a part of bills that, no more trash bag bills. But again, it's happening, but it needs to happen faster. We're losing kids every single day. And by the way, 80% of our death row inmates were in foster care.
Wow.
These
are the numbers that we need to hear, right? Not the fake numbers, but the real numbers. And the numbers will scare you, but they
do. I mean, look at the thing that we're, here, this is graduation season. Okay. This is when graduation season. It's so sad to me when I see that the statistics show that only 54% of 400,000 kids will actually graduate high school. That's it. Only 54%. And the saddest part, only 3% get a 4-year degree. Unacceptable. So those are the changes we need to make within our system.
Absolutely. I'm tired of hearing stories of foster care where they've given up themselves or they have that self-gift. I know, being a foster kid myself, Rob, I always second guess a lot of stuff. A lot of people think, oh, Miss Liz, you have it all together. You got this together. No, I don't, guys. I am just running by the skin of my teeth sometimes and trying to understand why I feel the shame and the guilt still 40 years later.
Yeah. By the way, I'm going to be 60 this year, and I'm going to say as much as, and love you, Dr. Rich, my therapist. I know he's listening. He did, he's been my therapist forever. Therapy has really helped me, but it still doesn't take everything away, Miss Liz. I still have some of the same things that you have. I'm not worthy. I didn't deserve this. I got that all the time. And, my youngest son, my best bud, my youngest son said something to someone, someone made a comment about me, and he says, I don't think you realize how hard my dad works. You might think my family has everything, but my dad, he worked so hard. And because this teacher came and called me and said, I heard your son say, he says, and the thing is, my dad has been working for all these other kids. My 17-year-old son, he got it. He was like, my dad, because my son has had to sacrifice his dad because I've had to be another, but he said that. He was like, my dad. So yeah, I love it.
Absolutely. And, I'm going to be 52 in a couple of days. And
You're looking good.
and I'm just like, some days I'm just like, why am I even here? Like, why do I get to do what I get to do? Why do I get to sit with the people that I get to sit with? And it's God's blessing. I did not let the past define who I was. I did not
No,
let
and
them hold me back. And that's exactly what you did with the Navy. The Navy gave you that grit, right, to fight back and to do what you did. And the good old resume. I didn't have a high school diploma, and everybody's like, Miss Liz, you have certificate. No, I don't have any of that. And I don't try to pretend that I am somebody I'm not, right? And I think that as a foster kid, we're really honest kids because we know what lies are.
Yeah, because we've been lied to forever. And by the way, 4 years ago, I received my honorary doctorate, and I will never. And by the way, like you, I only have a high school diploma, and I don't even know why the hell they gave me that. And so, and I remember when I got my honorary doctorate, I couldn't believe it. I stood up in front of there, that cap and gown, and I was like, I can't believe I'm doing. By the way, my husband, he's very educated, has a couple of degrees, he has a doctorate, he has his master's. But so I get this honorary doctorate. I give the commencement speech, don't think anything of it. Years go by, 4 years, as a matter of fact. And the dean reaches out to me and says, why do I not see you using the doctor? And I was like, he was like, you earned that. He was like, you earned that. You put that in front of your name. And you know what? I have to say, Miss Liz, I did earn it. And I need to embrace that. So yeah, but as a kid in foster care, it's like, how the hell did I get here? How could I have had doctor in front of me? I don't even know the difference between there, and there. I earned that doctor degree, and I'm going to use it. So yeah, that's Dr. Rob Scheer for any of those who want to know.
Well, congratulations on that doctorate. When I received 2, and I was like, I didn't go to school for medical treatment. Like, I'm not a doctor. Why are you giving me this doctor thing? I was like all confused, and they're like, well, you know how Dr. Phil, he's Dr. Phil. And I was like, yeah. And my spouse was explaining it to me, and he's like, that's an honorary doctorate. You got it for humanitarian purposes. And I was just like, yeah, but I don't want to be known as Dr. Liz. I want to be known as Liz. I don't know. I just have this feeling that I don't deserve it.
Right. Well, guess what? You do, Dr. Liz. You earned it, you deserve it, and you need to be praised about it. So embrace it. This is all about the grace. You're not giving yourself grace. You deserve that, and you need to be. And so, Dr. Liz, it's okay to have tea time with Dr. Liz because you're the doctor. The doctor is in.
Thank you so much for that. I've just put them to the side. I'm just like, I got them a couple of years ago, and I was like, why people were asking me, why are you not using it? And I was just like, I don't know. I just feel like I don't deserve them.
I know. 4 years. And it was my husband who actually bought me this.
Oh, well, look at that.
Yeah. And I said, yeah, please embrace it. I need to embrace it. So.
Well, we have a question for you again, Rob, coming in from the Luxury Rental Doctor Show. How has your family's journey influenced the way you run the nonprofit?
How is my family's journey? I mean, I have a son who has fetal alcohol syndrome. And I remember when he arrived, the social worker said he probably was never going to talk. And then most likely he wouldn't walk without braces on his legs. And I remember when we adopted him, we took him to Children's Hospital. And that's when we actually found out that he had fetal alcohol syndrome and his frontal lobe wasn't developed. And I remember the doctors telling us this is probably the best we were going to get out of Mackay. Well, I want to tell you, if it wasn't for the fact that we have a thing in our family that we never say no, and we never say never. And by the way, my son is 19 years old. He has almost a full scholarship, and he's minoring in public speaking. So with your question, do I take that from my family? Better believe it. Because why I brought this up is I'm a true believer in our organization. If our table is not big enough, we build a bigger table. Remember that in society. If your table's not big enough, you need to build a bigger table because everybody deserves to have a place, like my son Mackay. That was the whole thing, is that we thought at Comfort Cases, I want everybody to be welcome. So we, in our area, our national center, by the way, most times we have a 3-month waiting list for volunteers with people wanting to be here, but we have no restrictions. Right now, I have kids who are nonverbal. I have kids who are in wheelchairs. once again, your table's not big enough, build a bigger table.
Rob, we got a question for you is how has becoming a parent changed your perception on your own story?
Wow. Okay. So my perception on my own story is that for the longest time, I didn't want to tell my story, but now that I have my kids and my kids from foster care, and by the way, I didn't have a chance to talk about my oldest son, Alex, who I met at 18, an older adoption, very rare in foster care, but it happens. Older kids are amazing to be, and my son actually came to us after being with us and asked us to adopt him because he wanted the same last name as us and his sister and brothers. So, but I've been able to embrace my story. I'm not embarrassed the fact that, I'm learning that there thing, because I've been trying to get people not to use that in witch. Why do we need so many theirs and witches? But, I'm embracing it, telling the story.
Let's talk about Alex and how he came to you.
In 2019, I had sold all my businesses and became a public speaker. I decided I didn't want a job any longer. I wanted a purpose. And I remember telling my husband that I was going to get out of the industry. And he was like, you are the breadwinner of this family. And I was like, I know. I was like, but I really want to do this. And again, my kids, they don't go to private schools and they don't wear Louis Vuitton anymore. But what I remind my kids all the time is that if you can honestly look at me and say that your heart is not smiling, then we can rethink this. But my kids can't do that because my kids have realized that, being a doer and giving is so rewarding. So I walked up on a stage at a local high school and a young man walked up to me and he said, Mr. Scheer, will you sign my book? And I said, of course, what is your name? And he said, Alex. And he had told me he'd been in foster care, like since he was 5, been in and out, all like 11 homes, all this stuff. And 3 months after, I met him, went home, told the kids about meeting him. My kids were like, Dad, invite him to our house for dinner. And so we had invited him that Saturday, picked him up at his foster parents' house. And I remember we went out to dinner. And we were sitting at a Mexican restaurant and my son Tristan was 10. He's now 17. And he said, Alex, you can order anything off the menu and my dads don't care. And he was like, I can order anything? And he was like, I'm getting the shrimp fajitas. My daughter was like, Alex, haven't you been to Guapo's? And he was like, I don't remember the last time somebody took me to a restaurant. Miss T, at that moment, I realized, Miss Liz, that I'd done my job. I saw the empathy flow out of my kid's eyes. We had ate, went to Dave & Buster's, dropped him off at his foster parents' house. I get in the car and it's silent. And all of a sudden, one of the kids were like, Dad, we have to do something for Alex. I said, I know, I don't know what to do. And they were like, we have to bring him home. I was like, what? And they were like, we have to bring him home. I looked at my husband. He said, what's one more? My husband and I were the very first couple in the state of Maryland to petition the courts to have a child from foster care come and live with us without a stipend. The judge said to me, Mr. Scheer, why would you do this? I say to the judge, as I say to all of your listeners and viewers, every child deserves a foundation. Every child deserves to know there's someone they're rooting them on. Every child deserves to know, what does it feel like to be loved unconditionally? I looked at my son, Miss Liz, and he was crying. He said, Pops, you have changed my life. I said, no, buddy. I said, you've changed our lives. I said, I only have one regret. The judge said, Mr. Scheer, what is your regret? I said, I didn't get to walk him to kindergarten, but now I get to walk with him for the rest of his life. A year after that, we were in the height of COVID, and my son walked up to my husband and I and said, Pops, will you adopt me? I said, why, Alex? You're not going anywhere. And he's like, no, I want to have the same last name as my sister and brothers and as you and Dada. I called my adoption attorney and we adopted Alex. My kids are now 25, 21, 19, 19, and 17. Thank you.
Wow. And Rob, what final message would you have for all the listeners today?
Oh my gosh. I would tell each and every one of your listeners is to always understand is that forgiveness is truly not for someone else, but forgiveness is for your strength. So for me, I've forgiven everyone. I've forgiven my community for letting me down, my foster parents who gave up on me because of a check, my parents. I forgave them all. But by the way, I didn't forgive them for them. I forgave them for me because I took all that power back and I'm a better person because of forgiveness. So forgive.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Rob, for sitting with me and sharing your story and your children's story and making a difference in the communities and the world. We do have some updates. Rob shared with me before we went live that there is Canada in 2027 that you're working on. And he has one in the UK as well. So where else is comfort cases found?
So we're in all 50 states, DC, Puerto Rico, the United Kingdom, where we serve 84,000 children in the UK. And you're exactly right. We have been approved for our Canadian charitable license, and we're hoping to open up a center within the Toronto area where we can serve close to 64,000 kids in Canada.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'm just going to do a quick wrap up of what today's tea time is, and we'll be back at 7 p.m. and we'll do this all over again, guys. What a deeply and moving, important conversation. Rob, thank you for your honesty, your advocacy, and continuing to stand up for children whose voices are too often unheard. This afternoon, we were reminded that dignity matters, especially to a child. Something as simple as a backpack, pajamas, a book, or knowing someone cares enough to think about them can leave a lifelong impact. Your story shows us that trauma does not have to be the end of someone's story. It can become the reason they fight to make better for others.
Being romantic. Oh.
Comfort cases is not just providing items, it's providing hope, connection, and the reminder that every child deserves to feel valued. Here is something to carry with you after this tea time. What small act of compassion could you offer today that might completely change how someone feels about themselves? Because sometimes the things we see as small mean everything to someone else. Until our next cup, keep sharing, keep caring, keep advocating, and keep reminding people, especially children, that they do matter. And I'll see everybody at 7 p.m. and we'll do this all over again.